As a longtime volunteer, Roland knows what it means to be part of the BRYC community, and I want to start by inviting all of you to be in community with me. At BRYC, we do that through a simple call and response. So when I say BR, you say? BRYC. Good. Y'all are good. But we're going to do it, the trick is you have to do it however I do it. So if we're on a college tour or if we're in a program at BRYC, I might say, BR. BR? YC. All right, great. Now I really feel at home. Thank you. Speaking of feeling at home, I want to shout out my BRYC cheering section right here, which is filled with some of our incredible staff, as well as our board members, some incredible board members representing BRYC today. We have Corey Wilson, we have Karen Bro, Dave Lukey, Linda Posner, Laura Poche, and of course, Dr. Shonda Allen Mitchell. I appreciate y'all being here. So I turned 36 this past Sunday, and if you can believe it, I've been in this Rotary Club for 10 years, since I was 26. I looked it up and I found the original email correspondence with Christy from 2014, September 24th, 2014. Thanks to my nominators, longtime Rotarians, Michael Tipton and Cordell Heyman, I've been in this club for a really long time, and I became one of the club's youngest members. And since that day, 10 years ago, since I was inducted, I've been waiting for this moment to tell you a little story set in a place called Laurelville, Louisiana. A story about a woman named Marie and her husband Boudreaux. So one night, Marie and Boudreaux were laying in bed, and Boudreaux turned over and said, "Marie, if I died, do you think you get married again?" "I guess," she replied. "Well, would you sleep in the same bed with him?" Boudreaux asked. "Well, it's the only bed in the house, so I guess," Marie said. "Would you make love to him?" Boudreaux asked. "Well, I guess, since he'd be my husband." "Okay, but would you give him my pick-em-up truck?" "No, Boudreaux, I would never give him your pick-em-up truck. Besides, he don't know how to drive a stick shift." Thank you for letting me have that moment. And I thought Kent was going to be here, so shout out to Kent too. I'm glad I didn't have to follow him. That worked out. So as you can tell from my butchered Cajun accent, I'm not from around here. I was born in New York City, raised in South Florida, and in 2010, I was a senior in college trying to figure out my next step. I decided to apply to a program called Teach for America, which at the time was experiencing a record surge in popularity. That year, almost 50,000 people applied, most of them soon to be college graduates, all vying for just 4,500 openings. I wasn't an education major like my wife, Bree, who I met in the program, and I needed to distinguish myself. So on my application, rather than selecting a location preference, I put me where I'm most needed. I figured that would increase my odds of getting into the program, and sure enough, a few months later, I was accepted, assigned to South Louisiana. Teach for America is a 2-year commitment, and I'll be completely honest with you, as soon as I landed at Baton Rouge Airport, that clock started ticking in my mind. Now, in my defense, Louisiana then was like a foreign country to me. I mean, when I first heard someone say Atchafalaya, I said, "Oh, God bless you." I mean, for the longest time, I thought Nutria was some kind of health supplement. And we don't even need to talk about where a 22-year-old's mind goes when people are yelling, "Pinch the tail and suck the head," okay? We don't need to talk about that. Needless to say, I was out of my element. No more so than in my 7th grade social studies class at Baker Middle School. The privilege of my own educational experience made it very difficult for me to comprehend what students at Baker Middle were up against. Despite the presence of several dedicated educators with whom I remain in contact, including Colleen McGee, who's here to support me today, the school as a whole, from dilapidated facilities to chronic personnel shortages to general disorganization, could not support serious learning and holistic development. If you haven't spent much time in our city's most under-resourced public schools, then you would have been similarly shocked by the disadvantages students face, and similarly troubled, understanding how these disadvantages compound throughout their lives. It was as if they were on a treadmill. Hard work was no guarantee of forward progress. But I also saw what was possible when my students had a modicum of the support that I had growing up. I saw what should be obvious, that when students who lose the birth lottery have access to the tools and sustained guidance that all young people need to succeed, they succeed too. No different from your children or my children or your grandchildren. My most shining example of this no-brainer theory is Maisha Anderson, who there's a picture of on the screen. She is one of my original 7th graders who eventually joined BRYC, went to Oglethorpe University, and now works at BRYC as our full-time operations manager. She unfortunately couldn't make it today. She's taking some much-needed vacation time. I'm so proud of Maisha, but when I think about my other students, I do wonder, where are they now? Baker Middle seeped into my bloodstream. After testing my limits to see if I would stick it out, my students gradually allowed themselves to trust me, to get close to me, and we did some special things. We made up songs to make social studies stickier. Remember, Colleen? No branch has too much power when we check and balance, check and balance, check and balance, check and balance. We started a Rotaract Club. We took a trip to Washington, D.C., and I proudly coached 2 of the losingest seasons in Baker basketball history. We also saw historic growth on the iLeap test, but my proudest moment came months before the results came in. We were having a final review for the iLeap, and suddenly over the PA system, the principal got on and said, "Everybody head to the gym. We're having an impromptu pep rally," because of course we should have an impromptu pep rally when we're prepping for the test. Dexter Dennis stood up out of his chair and he said, "Mr. Spielfogel, we're not leaving this room until we finish this review." Hand to God. Best moment of my 2 years teaching there. My experience at Baker was humbling, partly because teaching is the hardest work on the planet, and the way that our society regards and compensates teachers does not remotely reflect the rigor and complexity of their jobs or our supposed desire to have an educated workforce. But also humbling because I had to confront that millions of children across this nation are living a reality that should be mortifying to us all. This reality is certainly unacceptable for our own children, and yet we tolerate it for other people's children because they have been so marginalized that they are almost invisible to us. It was impossible to ignore what I experienced at Baker Middle, both the problems and the untapped promise. In spring 2012, I was approaching the end of my 2 years, and I met a TFA alum named Daniel Kahn, who had been in Baton Rouge since 2005. Dan was teaching at Bel Air High when he saw the same immense potential in his students, who ought to have been pursuing higher education but lacked key resources to do so. So he launched an after-school program that would provide free ACT prep and college counseling, planting the seeds for what in 2009 would become the Baton Rouge Youth Coalition. And 3 years later, just as I was contemplating my life after Baker, Dan was seeking a successor to grow BRYC from a scrappy startup to something sustainable. And that's what I've been up to for the last 12 years. At its inception, in 2009, BRYC was serving 15 students. This school year, we have about 300 8th through 12th graders across 2 after-school program sites, as well as 670 alumni, whom we follow through college and into their careers in ways that I will explain shortly. Next school year, we're taking our next big leap. Thanks to our partnership with the EBR school system, BRYC will open a 3rd after-school site located in the Woodlawn area. And you are some of the first people to find out that in addition to that, we will be, for the first time ever, launching college counseling services inside of 5 EBR high schools: Liberty, McKinley, Scotlandville, Northeast, and Tara, making our services available to students who otherwise could not participate in BRYC. In total, in 2024-25, we're aiming to have between 600 to 650 8th through 12th graders, more than 2 times our current population, while serving an alumni cohort of 760. This expansion is also supported by a $2 million grant that BRYC recently secured through Mackenzie Scott's Yield Giving Open Call, a grant program which BRYC emerged from with the highest scoring, with some of the highest scores among 6,300 applicants nationwide. BRYC won this grant because of our data. We hang our hat on numerous metrics, including, for example, that a typical BRYC cohort will average 3 points growth on the ACT during their time with us, and that 100% of them will graduate from high school with solid post-secondary plans. But our critical number is 83%, the rate at which our 670 and counting alumni persist in 2- and 4-year degree programs, which is more than 5 times the national average for students from low socioeconomic backgrounds. This figure signals that BRYC works, but it is much more so a reflection of what again should be obvious, that when underserved students have the tools and sustained guidance that we all want for our own children and grandchildren, they excel too. When low-income students have a launch pad, they fly too. About 75% of our alumni attend or have graduated from in-state schools, including the ones listed there with whom we have memorandums of understanding. But I'm also proud of the BRYC alumni who are representing Baton Rouge at Stanford, Emory, Brown, North Carolina A&T, Dartmouth, Howard, NYU, Wesleyan, Wellesley, UChicago, Skidmore, UVA, Georgia Tech, Spelman, Morehouse, Columbia, Rhodes, Union, Davidson, UNC Chapel Hill, Vanderbilt, Colby, Tulane, Xavier, and many, many more. BRYC alums have attended more than 100 institutions across 28 states, and they've studied and lived all over the world. BRYC's theory of change is to be a lifelong support system. We recognize the disproportionate challenges our fellows face in higher education and the professional world, and so we walk with them into, through, and beyond their post-secondary experiences. This uncommonly long intervention gives us the privilege of watching them grow into young professionals. Like Kamisha Brumfield, a Scotlandville High grad and current HR specialist at BRYC. Dominique Ricks, a Bel Air High graduate and the first ever black principal in his Wisconsin school district's history, not to mention a former Rotary speaker. Myra Richardson, a Baton Rouge High grad and Chief Development Officer at the Louisiana Chamber of Commerce Foundation. Jadarius Taylor, a Madison Prep grad and Chief Technology Officer at the same Birmingham Middle School where he taught with TFA. Amber Richardson, a McKinley High grad and geriatric nurse at Baton Rouge General. Jay Sean Whalem, a Southern Lab graduate and IT specialist for the state of Louisiana. Amanda Alfaro, a Baton Rouge High grad and project manager at Envoke. Jonathan Scott, a Bel Air High grad and associate at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Markayla Collins, a Liberty High grad and 6th grade math teacher at Fair Park Middle in Shreveport. Henry Thomas, a Scotlandville High grad and engineer at Leondell Bassell Industries, who married his BRYC sweetheart, Javion, an engineer at Dow. And Kari Stevens, a Baton Rouge High graduate working as an infant and early childhood mental health specialist at Tulane's Tykes program. Every one of these BRYC alumni and hundreds more maintain meaningful, regular contact with BRYC, not only by accessing our support and attending alumni events, but also and especially by mentoring our high school students. At BRYC, the mission is sustained impact. From 8th grade to eternity, we are interested only in actions that make it more likely for our fellows to lead personally fulfilling, financially sustainable lives. This work, if done with integrity, is extremely resource intensive and not easily scalable, which is also true of having children. But we don't question what we must pour into our own children to ensure they succeed. We just do what it takes for as long as it takes. That's BRYC's promise to our fellows and their families. And if inherent to this promise is the audacity to believe that BRYC can change lives, then we must also have the humility to ask, where are they now? And answer it honestly. The data I've shared today are rigorous and real. But any organization can represent a well-curated selection of stories and statistics as the absolute truth when the truth is really this. Our fellows walk through minefields in pursuit of their education and careers. I recently had coffee with an alum, Kobe, who after high school graduation appeared to have it made. He earned a full scholarship to a university in Boston, which offered him an all-expenses-paid summer bridge program designed to ease underrepresented students' college transition. Although Kobe found community alongside peers from similar backgrounds that summer, when freshman year started, he felt like an outcast amongst predominantly white, middle and upper class peers at an institution whose faculty and staff were ill-equipped to meet the needs of a first-generation black male from Baton Rouge. With BRYC's support, Kobe made the very difficult decision, the excruciating decision, during his sophomore year to give up his scholarship and transfer to LSU. If not for my time at BRYC, I wouldn't know that students from low socioeconomic backgrounds often carry a heavy burden of support for their families. This support can take many forms, contributing financially, caring for younger siblings, driving relatives around, and much more. It is part of the necessarily communal nature of resource-constrained families. But for a college student like Kobe working 40 hours in retail a week, it makes focusing on your education virtually impossible. He ultimately withdrew from LSU and began making ends meet with odd jobs, driving Amazon vans and bartending. Under the weight of family and financial pressure, and with his future on hold, his mental health suffered significantly. As you can imagine, there's a lot more to this story, but today Kobe is a full-time teller at a local bank and doing as well as ever. Over coffee, he shared about his new job, his gradually improving relationship with his mother, and his goals for the future. And then he asked me, "Are you proud of me?" And I said, "Of course I am." But what he'll never grasp is that I'm actually in awe of him. He has been through a gauntlet, which I've barely revealed to you. And he's 23, handling his entire adult life on his own. A success story, no doubt, but still a road filled with heavy costs to a paycheck-to-paycheck existence without meaningful financial upside. Y'all, we have to realize just how unattainable the American dream has become for many people. The people who need it the most. Stories like Kobe's tend to embolden people who feel strongly that college is not for everyone. I agree with them, except when what they really mean is that it's not for poor kids. One thing is for sure, economically vulnerable students cannot afford for college not to pay off, and it is the responsibility of agencies like BRYC to ask questions that lead to profitable guidance. A recent study from the Burning Glass Institute and Strata Education Foundation, which is led by Baton Rouge's own Stephen Moray, called Talent Disrupted, did just that. Interrogating the link between higher education and economic opportunity, I want to share some of its findings with you. 1 year after college graduation, 52% of college graduates are underemployed. meaning they are in occupations that don't typically require a 4-year degree. Even a decade after graduation, 45% of graduates remain underemployed. The study further reports that underemployment is exceedingly sticky, difficult to escape. 73% of graduates who start out underemployed right out of college are 3.5 times more likely to remain underemployed than students who start out right away in college-level jobs, which are jobs typically requiring a 4-year degree. This discrepancy comes with a heavy financial cost. The study found that a recent graduate in a college-level job earns 88% more than someone with just a high school diploma, whereas a college graduate who is underemployed earns only 25% more than someone with a high school diploma, once again proving how the ROI doesn't shake out the same for everybody. Every educational and economic development organization should be poring over this study. And while it raises red flags, it also points to opportunities that BRYC is already seizing. The study reports that the first job after college graduation is crucial. That almost 80% of graduates who start out in college-level jobs will remain in college-level employment 5 years later. And of those who remained in college-level occupations 5 years later were still in college-level occupations 10 years later. 86% of those. Equally exciting was the finding that graduates who hold even one internship during college are 48.5% less likely to be underemployed than those who had no internships. And internships actually have the strongest relationship with Black graduates' ability to obtain college-level jobs compared to other racial groups. These data affirm BRYC's decision in January to hire our very first Director of Career Services, who's sitting right in front of me, Miss Kenya Warren Hollins, a former Miss Southern with 10 years of career coaching experience, whose focus is to help our alumni get situated professionally. Kenya's first big win, true to form of the study, was landing a partnership with BRYC that will provide 30 paid internships to BRYC alumni this summer. Kenya has also built a partnership with the Society of Human Resources Management, SHRM, wherein its members serve as professional mentors to our soon-to-be and recent college graduates. Finally, and most importantly, Kenya is working one-on-one with all our soon-to-be graduates, supporting them through their professional transition with everything from resume building to interview prep to salary negotiation. And there are other steps BRYC is taking to ensure that fellows are on the right track way before they get to Kenya. First, starting in 8th grade, we're training fellows to focus on skills over credentials, to think about their college experience as a chance to beef up their toolkit of applicable competencies, rather than simply to earn a degree for its own sake. Second, we have never been more targeted in the college search process, helping fellows and families choose colleges and academic programs that will maximize their professional possibilities. This includes encouraging more and more students than ever to embrace community college when it is more financially and academically viable. 10% of BRYC's class of 2023 started at BRCC. But there's something else in the study that jumped out to me. The study reports that Black and Hispanic students are substantially more likely than students of any other race or ethnicity to end up underemployed, regardless of other factors. And it is exactly at this point in the conversation where a lack of context leads to oversimplified conclusions. It is insufficient to tell Black and Hispanic students who are disproportionately from low-income backgrounds that they need to get internships and they need to secure college-level first jobs without acknowledging the broader constraints that block them from these milestones. Their day-to-day financial stress makes it exceedingly difficult to focus on schoolwork, which requires a clear mind. And they often have to choose retail jobs for quick cash rather than accepting career-aligned unpaid internships to gain experience or even paid internships, which don't pay well typically. And as we discussed earlier, low SES students often use what money they do make to help their families. These students are also constrained in terms of their comfort navigating bureaucracy and authority. Middle and upper income students are socialized under the premise that the world is their oyster, and this sense of entitlement is advantageous in pursuing opportunities. Low SES students, on the other hand, have spent their entire lives making do within institutions and are generally less comfortable and less experienced advocating for themselves and playing the game to get ahead. White and Asian students certainly come from low SES backgrounds, just not nearly as often as black and brown students, who are therefore less likely to have the social capital of their affluent peers. We all know that opportunity is also a function of who you know, and low SES students and their families simply don't have the connections that upper and middle income families have to facilitate internship and job placement. We should be asking if college is worth it. But that question is worthless without a more nuanced critique of what makes college's ROI so unequally accessible. Instead, we should ask, what structures must exist to make sure higher education pays off for those who need it most? I'm as qualified as anyone you'll meet to tell you that our city is filled with bright youth on the margins. And if we don't meet the moral imperative to support them and the economic imperative to harness their talent, then that's our choice, and it will be our bill that comes due. Bank telling is honest work, but we need Kobe's big brain in a position of influence. For 15 years, BRYC Fellows have been proving what's possible when low SES students have access to high-quality resources and an enduring support system. It's not easy, but it's simple. They need what your children need. So let me tell you how you can help. First, consider becoming a mentor. BRYC's after-school program could not function without the presence of hundreds of volunteer mentors, several of whom are in the room today. Mentors commit one evening per week from 6 to 7:15, supporting the same one or small group of fellows under the guidance of a full-time staff member. The only requirement is consistency. You don't need to be an expert, just consistent. If you are interested in learning more, please, after this, and I will end on time, come see our tables down here to get a flyer, and also consider joining us at Uncle Earl's tonight for a drink and a volunteer information session. Second, if you are a business leader, open a paid internship for a BRYC college student. You've already heard about the critical importance of internships to long-term professional success. We will facilitate the application process and make sure you end up with an intern ready to add value. To learn more, please come see Kenya or email her at kenya@thebrick.org. Finally, I want you to do this. I want you to imagine a future in which you would not accept for another's child anything less than you would tolerate for your own. It's possible to think that way. It's possible to act that way. It's possible to create a reality in which every child is one of our own, in the same way that you've embraced me. Thank you. I have 3 minutes for questions.
See, any internship that you brought up, would that be for a high school level student or a college level?
College level. The question was the paid internships that I mentioned, those would be for college level students.
Lucas, thank you for.
Where we get our resources through a combination of school district support, private philanthropy, and foundation grant making.
Lucas, thank you for the great presentation, very honest presentation. What has been surprising in the pushback that you have gotten in the Baton Rouge community, both when you started and whatever pushback you get now?
Pushback. That's a really good question. I think that I hit on it in the speech in regard to, and I think some of it has been good for me, is, I came into this community with a 4-year college bias. And I think that the data do demonstrate the value of 4-year degrees, but oftentimes the data focus on earnings instead of wealth, which we know debt factors into. And so I think rather than even calling it pushback, I would say people have challenged, how can we make sure that BRYC fellows have access to all different pathways, because there's many different viable pathways, and it's really up to us to make sure we're prepared to support those different pathways.